Good evening. This hearing is now in session and is being recorded to maintain a permanent record. My name is Danielle Boudreau. I am the rulemaking coordinator at the Department of State Lands, and I will be serving as the department's hearing officer. Today's date is July 21st, 2025, and the time is 6 p.m. Joining me from the department are, turn it over to you, Blake. You're muted.
I am. Thank you. Hi, Blake Helm. I'm the proprietary specialist for the Oregon Department of State Lands. I handle planning and policy for the department's waterway use authorization program.
And my name's Justin Russell. I'm a proprietary coordinator at the department, and I'm mostly tasked with, reviewing and managing leases and registrations throughout the state.
All right, thank you. The purpose of this evening's meeting is twofold. We will begin with a 30-minute information session, followed by the public rule hearing for the proposed rule changes for the Department of State Lands administrative rules governing the issuance of waterway leases, licenses, and registrations, also known as the department's proprietary program. During the information session, Blake and Justin will provide information regarding the need for rulemaking, proposed rule changes, and annual lease payment examples. We ask that you hold any questions until the presentation has ended, at which time we will gladly answer those questions. Once that is concluded, we will begin the public rule hearing. Please note that during the rule hearing, the department will not be answering any questions or responding to comments. This meeting will conclude when all participants who wish to comment have finished, or at 8 p.m., whichever comes first. For our Zoom protocols, we ask that each person who wishes to speak raise their hand. To raise your hand, click the reactions near the bottom of your screen and click raise hand, or by pressing *9 if you are on the phone. We will seek a balance of speaking time during the discussions. For technical support, please message us in the chat. We ask that you please keep your mic muted unless it is your turn to speak, and the use of video is encouraged. If you're calling from the phone participating that way, to unmute, you'll press *6. We ask that all participants be respectful of each other and DSL representatives. And at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Blake.
Thanks, Danielle. So just a reminder, I'm Blake Helm. I'm a proprietary specialist for the Department of State Lands. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. I'd like to start by providing some background and a general overview of our process. And first, why is DSL going through this rulemaking process? Largely for two reasons. One, back in 2018, DSL partnered with the Portland State University to review our funding mechanisms for the waterway leasing program, as well as to identify strategies that would help us implement, or that we could implement to help achieve sustainable operations for our waterway reuse authorization program. Some of those strategies that we identified, we implemented already, and those include adding vessel reporting requirements, as well as updating our guidance and procedures for site inspections. And the second major reason were some serious environmental risks and unexpected financial liabilities that arose from private use of public lands. And these risks and liabilities help to highlight the need for DSL to update our rules, especially those concerning contract terms and conditions, such as lease duration, financial assurance requirements, as well as ensuring that structures are maintained in good condition and that authorized uses do not unreasonably interfere with public trust values. Next slide, please. Our rulemaking efforts, we had several goals in mind. Namely to make changes that would help cover the administrative costs for processing applications, creating a single method for calculating rent, and having that method based on real market value, as well as the type of activity that is authorized. Requiring financial assurance, such as insurance for our waterway registrations, Using clear and simple language, so amending rules and sections that are confusing or needlessly complex, and then reducing the term for new waterway leases to 5 years. Next slide, please. Um, and part of the department's work up to this point included creating a rulemaking advisory committee. This committee consisted of 10 members from a range of interest groups such as city, county, state government, ports, private marinas, and other commercial users, excuse me, as well as environmental interest groups. We met once a month for 6 months, reviewing rules, as well as listening to feedback and suggestions. I would like to note that, based on the great feedback that we received, we were able to make, several changes to our proposed rules. So just really wanted to take a brief moment to thank, I don't know if we have any RAC members here, but to thank those who were members and participated on the committee to, give them a shout out for all the work that they did. Next slide, please. This leads us to a summary of what changes the department is proposing. For our fees, the proposed rules would create new fees to cover scenarios where the department incurs a higher cost, a one-time increase to existing fees so that we could account for inflation since the rule went into effect, and an annual increase for fees moving forward. In addition, a new annual SLEF fee was created and will be applied to existing and new leases. This helps create a sustainable funding source for the department's Submerged Lands Enhancement Fund, which is a fund that provides grants for projects in submerged and submersible lands that enhance and improve our waterways. Next slide. So in addition to the changes in our fees, we created a single method to calculate our annual lease payments, and we based this method on three variables. One, the value of the adjacent land, expressed as a dollar per square foot, and then the area itself in square feet, uh, as well as a rental rate, which is a percentage between 3 and 8%. That's based on the location and the activity that's authorized. And the modifiers that kind of adjust this rental rate, they're listed and defined in rule, and they're limited in their overall effect to the rental rate. It should be noted that calculations for the rental rate start at 3% and like I said, won't exceed 8%. So other changes that we have, we made changes updating our minimum payment requirements and creating a maximum payment. Like I mentioned before, reducing new lease terms to 5 years and creating a separate rule section that explains our financial assurance requirements, detailing the conditions in which we would use bonds among other items, and then clarified how DSL handles appeals and contested case hearings. Next, I'll hand it over to Justin, who can walk us through some examples.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Blake. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Before we go into those examples, I just kind of wanted to spell out, show exactly what that rent formula is. You'll see at the top of the screen here on the left. So the rent formula is, we're looking at adjacent land value times the rental rate. We take that number and then multiply it by the authorized area. So that's the area that is being leased from the department. And that gives you the annual lease payment. That rental rate, as Blank mentioned, has a 3% kind of base value, and then there's kind of a set of modifiers over on the right side of the screen here, depending on the type of use and the location of the use, that kind of scale up from 3%. There are some modifiers like the beneficial waterway program or the providing public access that can actually reduce the rental rate. But in general, most of the rental rate modifiers do add to that base 3%. We can go to the next slide. Just a few other things to kind of consider before we look at examples. So just want to make clear that these rental rates will be redetermined at the time of lease renewal or a modification. So if your lease expires 5 or 10 years from now, there's not going to be a change to your rent beyond what's already stipulated in your lease agreement with the department. These changes would take place, when you go to renew your lease or if you were to modify your lease agreement with the department. These rate increases, so that we kind of went through that formula. Um, Aside from the formula and the value that determines, there is a limit of 15% of rent increase in these rules. So based on the last year's rent of your lease, the new lease rent can only go up 15%. There is a new minimum. So the new minimum for leases is $1,200 per parcel. And then there's a lease maximum of $150,000 per parcel per year. And then each year there's a 3% escalator kind of built into the lease agreements, similar to what we have already. So we can go to the next slide and just get to a few examples. So this is a large marina. This is a lease that the department has with the Port of Astoria. Their 2024 rent was $33,000 and 33 just under $34,000. They currently their rent is determined based on the 3% of gross method. So using that method, the lessee submits reports as to how much income they're deriving from operations inside the leasehold to the department. And then we, use that information to calculate 3% of that gross and then bill them for that annually. Under the new rules, that method is going away. So we're going to that kind of formula that we showed on screen before. So we're going to be looking at the ALV, the rental rate, the adjacent land value, the rental rate, and the authorized area. So here you can see there's an adjacent land value of $1.70. The rental rate modifiers in this instance, so this is a marina, so it gets a 0.25% increase from that 3%. It's inside the coastal zone, which is a 0.5% increase. And it's also on a waterway that's been determined to be essential salmonid habitat. And so all those modifiers combined add up to an effective rental rate of 4.25%. So the rent in the new lease scenario, so if the rent was going to be redetermined for 2025, the lease payment would be 38,873. And this is one of those instances where, aside from using the formula, there was, I think, the lease payment was going to be higher than this, but because of that 15% maximum increase, the rent increase is only 15%, excuse me. We can go to the next slide. So this is definitely a much smaller and different kind of situation. So this is a lease the department has with River Road Baptist Church. Currently their rent for 2025 was $514. That was determined using the flat rate method currently. This marina has a much higher adjacent land value of $9.61 per square foot, but it's also a much smaller footprint of 4,333 square feet. This lease has modifiers kind of off of that 3% base as well. So it's a non-commercial use. It's within the coastal zone, and it's also within a waterway that's considered essential salmonid habitat. So this has an effective rental rate of 4.1%. So the 2025 rent was $514. There is a 15% rent increase maximum, but the new annual lease minimum is $1,200. So this is one of those this is one of those situations where a lessee, essentially the lease minimum applies to these kind of situations. We can go on to the next slide. So this is a lease the department has with Dulich Realty. So this is in Newport. Um, the existing lease is actually, if you can see the map depicted here, the existing lease had, one large parcel. And under the new lease, the department is going to be splitting up these large parcels so that rent is determined on a kind of per parcel basis as they're adjacent to, upland tax lots. So the 2024 rent here was $12,322. The authorized area, 20,000 square feet. You can see the rental rate modifiers. So this is a marine industrial marine service, waterway lease. It's within the coastal zone within essential sun-mounted habitat. So it has a rental rate of 4.5%. This lease is again kind of falls into that category where it's affected by the 15% rent increase. And so the annual lease payment here is $14,171. We can go to the next slide. And so if you have questions about kind of how these new rules will apply to your specific situations, we don't necessarily have the information, at our fingertips to be able to provide you specific calculations here. But what we're hoping is that people will submit their questions and inquiries to the email address listed here. So that's dsl.rules, and that's at dsl.oregon.gov. That's an email address. If you can submit your inquiries about your specific lease that you're interested in, we're going to collect those inquiries and get back to you as soon as possible with, kind of estimates as what you could expect to see with these rules. And I think that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Justin. That brings us to our question portion of this hearing. And before we open it up for questions from the public, I did want to go over some frequently asked questions. So since opening the comment period July 1st, we've received some public comments already, and some of them have a recurring theme. So we thought it best to go over those that keep popping up. So one that we keep seeing is what is the benefit that the public's going to get from changing how we calculate our rent. And the benefits that we see is the public would be fairly compensated, right, for the private use of public lands. Currently, the methodology for calculating rent has us choosing the least amount possible. So it's what I will refer to as a race to the bottom at times. And second, we feel that these changes, would create a more sustainable program. And that's because, we're using not just this single method, but the variables that we're using it are based on objective standards, um, namely county real market value, which is, a value that is calculated by professionals using objective standards, and is, as I mentioned, a third party. It's not coming from DSL, but rather an outside source that we can use, to calculate our rent. Um, Another question that's come up often are what do the application fees and annual rent payments cover? And kind of a tandem question would be where do excess funds go? So our application fees and annual payments cover the cost and expense of running the proprietary program. And this includes a lot of activities, uploading applications and other documents into our database, reviewing applications, describing them, mapping them, calculating rent or other compensation that's required, coordinating signatures for authorizations, public outreach, managing those authorizations by either inspecting them or processing assignments and amendments, drafting enforcement or compliance or renewal letters or other notices, reviewing insurance, and the list, kind of goes on. So, there's a lot of activities that we do, and that's what our application fees and rent payments go to cover, that time and the expense of doing those activities. And so any funds that we do receive that exceed this amount, they would go to help pay the agency's other administrative costs. For example, we have other programs, removal fill program, mitigation program, fiscal, IT departments, support staff. So any of these funds that we receive in excess of proprietary costs would go to cover other agency costs. And then in the end, if there are excess funds or when there are excess funds, those funds go into and are transferred to the Common School Fund, which is, the pot of money that funds the department itself. Lastly, a brief explanation about recreational cabin definition. We had a number of questions that came up from the changes that we made, and so we thought it best to maybe clarify what the intent of those changes are. Perhaps we'll need to make some further tweaks to the definition so that that's clear what it is what we're speaking to. But the point of updating the definition was to ensure that we're properly defining these recreational cabins, which are cabins and just excuse me, they're types of structures that don't have utilities, they're not connected to the adjacent upland, and they don't have kitchens or bathrooms. They're real bare bone structures that people use on a seasonal or periodic basis for either recreational activities such as hunting or fishing, kayaking. So they're meant as not like a floating home, and not as a dwelling, but as a seasonal use cabin. So now we'll open it up and take questions about the department's proposed rules and rulemaking process. I would just like to remind folks to keep their questions as short as possible so that everybody has an opportunity to ask questions.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Blake and Justin. I will call on individuals as they raise their hand. As a reminder, if you are on the phone, to raise your hand, you simply press *9, and on the phone to unmute yourself, you press *6. So at this time, and if you could change your name to provide a first name, that would be helpful. But at this time, the first person who's raised their hand has the name of Lopez. And if you could just please keep your questions brief. We'll go ahead and let Blake and Justin answer those for you. Thank you.
My name is Kimberly Lopez. I want to clarify, did I hear that proof of insurance will be required?
Blake or Justin?
Yeah, happy to answer that. We currently require insurance for our leases, and the proposed rules would expand financial assurance requirements to registrations. This would allow those smaller private and personal recreational, structures to be covered under HOA policies, homeowner insurance policies. That's the intent.
Okay, have you been made aware that some structures are not insurable?
We've talked to a number of insurance agents as well as to DAS Risk Management and our brokerage, and the insurance requirements that we have, we feel are out there in the insurance out there as products, available from insurance agents. For example, small docks can be covered as other structures in your homeowner's policies, and so that would be the intent for those smaller structures. And then larger structures that would require more insurance or more complicated insurance would typically fall under, marine industrial, marine service, or other heavy commercial or industrial uses.
Are you looking specifically for just liability insurance or covering the structure if it were to burn down?
Specifically liability, but if the structure needed to be removed, that is our hope to be able to have insurance coverage. But we understand that it's a little more complicated when talking about the removal of a structure, or if, like you say, the structure burns, and sinks, the cleanup of that structure. We understand that's a little bit more complicated. So liability is what we're intending to cover. So the liability associated with the use of that structure itself.
Okay, just the reason I'm asking specifically, and I guess this will just have to be something ironed out personally, is that I did have liability insurance on the dock. It's just a dock is all it is. It's a floating dock, and it's less than 1,000 square feet. And I did have liability insurance on it, and I received notice from my insurance company that there is no market. This was their excuse. There is no market for that type of structure. And so they took away the liability and insurance. And I'm going to tell you, I've called every insurance agent from here to Florida to try to get coverage on it. And it can't happen because they're saying there is no market.
Thank you for your question and your comment. And if you, sorry
Yep.
to interrupt, I just want to make sure we get to everybody else. We have 4 other individuals. But if you have further comment that you wish to submit, methods of submitting comments will be shown at the end of the meeting. So
Yep.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle.
Monty Campbell.
Mahmoud. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of, we call them duck shacks throughout the Columbia River system. And I don't know any of them that doesn't have, the fact we're required to have a bathroom that we can haul our waste in and out or out with. And all of them have a little cook stove, and all of them have a wood stove or some other kind of heat. So are you saying that now all of a sudden all these recreational cabins are no longer recreational cabins? Because, I mean, are we supposed to, we can only stay there till we have to go to the bathroom and then we have to leave? Or are we supposed to go out to our boat and poop in a bucket and throw it in the river instead of hauling it out like we are? How is that not how can you have a recreational cabin that you can't eat, you can't poop, and you can't stay warm in? My wool tent has that.
Mr. Campbell, so the intent was not that you couldn't eat or go to the bathroom while you're, using your recreational services, but that there's not direct plumbing from the city, say for those type of sewer services, or electrical services, or a gas line, or any of those what we call upland utilities, that they're not connected, that this is a standalone cabin that you have to haul in, haul out things to fully use it, so to speak.
All right, so I think I understand, and that makes sense. So if we have a small cook stove that we have to haul gas, propane in and out on, that's okay. If we have a toilet that's a self-contained unit that we drain into I do use a rhino tank and haul it out, and if we have a wood stove in it, all that's okay for a recreational cabin.
That is correct, because it's not attached to the upland and you're not getting those services from the upland. So like no gangway to get access to, so boat in only access is the intent. So
I think you just solved it. I think you just relieved a whole lot of people.
But that's not how the definition
But the
reads.
definition doesn't read that way in definition 29 though.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I'm happy to talk a little more offline, Monty, so we can maybe work through,
Okay,
excuse me, Mr. Campbell, so we can maybe work through.
either one's fine,
Um,
thank you.
all right, great. So please message me and we can look at making some amendments to
How do I
to
message
that
you? Is that through
definition.
that email address?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you
Yep.
very much. I appreciate your help.
Absolutely. Happy to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Next up, we have someone with the phone number of 541-480-3212. And to take yourself off mute, just *6. We cannot hear you. Let's see. And unfortunately, I cannot unmute you.
Yep.
There you go. You're off mute.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, great, thanks. Sorry about that. My name's Brian O'Halloran, and I have a duck shack down in the Columbia too, and I can tell you there has been a huge uproar over this. I fielded no less than 20 calls over the weekend, and it has to do with what Judge Campbell just addressed, and that's floating recreational cabin. It's impossible to have a duck shack. The duck shacks have been there since 1890, and we cannot have a duck shack without cooking facilities, without heating, and without a toilet with a cartridge that we take home. We collect our gray water, we collect our toilet water, and we bring it home. All of us do. And we have to have some way to heat the place, and we have to be able to cook food. And your floating recreational cabin definition says that it cannot have any of those things. And so that needs to be amended, I would think. So I'm glad Judge Campbell brought that up. And do you guys see the need to change that?
So as I just mentioned to, excuse me, Mr. Campbell, Judge Campbell, I'm happy to look at that definition and make sure that our intent is captured because as I mentioned, it's not to prevent these cabins from, from people being able to eat or use the facilities while they're out there on the cabin, but that to make sure that they're not connected to city sewer, to electrical or gas lines or other upland utilities. So if that definition that we have proposed is not clear, we would love to uh, have a conversation offline where we can, maybe amend the language to better capture, what the reality is.
Excellent. Thanks so much. I know I have limited time. I had one quick question that had to just expand on what Ms. Lopez said. We are unable to find an insurance company to insure the duck shacks. We just can't do it. We had Red Shield, but they said we're not insuring anymore. And no other insurance company would do it. But we do have it named in our personal umbrella for our homeowners insurance. Would that suffice for you guys if we had a State Farm or Allstate or Chubb that said, yes, that's covered for liability in your personal umbrella?
You're really putting me on the spot, sir. No, I don't know without seeing the facts, without seeing the actual liability umbrella coverage. But the intent, like I mentioned earlier, is to capture, to cover our liabilities. And so if that umbrella coverage, if that's what does it, then we're happy to accept that. We would just likely have to work with our partners at DAS Risk Management to make sure that your policy is covering what we need it to cover. And then I'll just also end by saying that, you know, we have a list of folks that we have worked with to get insurance through, as well as we have a broker that we can talk with who can assist on, you know, where best to get this type of insurance policy. So if folks are struggling getting those insurance, we have resources available to them to help them, you know, find insurance and get the coverage that's going to meet all of our needs. So.
Okay, and just because there's so much concern from all the duck shack owners, one other quick question there. You said that you determine the rate of rent based on adjacent property value. If you're adjacent to a federal wildlife refuge island, how do you determine the value, or how can we try to anticipate what our rent's going to be? This could potentially turn into just a rich man's game.
Yeah, so under those circumstances, we'd have to find a comparable land that would provide a similar value. So as with other, you know, real estate transactions, you know, if you're trying to find what is the value of this land, you look to comparables. So you look to similar land and see how that is valued. So that's what we would do under those circumstances.
And
Okay.
just, Blake, just to clarify as well, a floating recreational cabin is considered a registration, not a waterway lease. So not
That's
necessarily.
correct.
So there's just yeah, it's a different compensation determination. So registrations are charged a flat amount once every 5 years, and that's different than waterway leasing, which uses the formula that we kind of discussed earlier. So it's a
And
different.
for waterway leasing, you're using the definition of a structure that's connected to land or services. Is that right?
Yeah, essentially, it's for our leases, it's, you know, based on a certain size of the structure, as well as it's, you know, the type of use, and those often dictate that there's some connection to the upland, to utilities, and, you know, other more intensive use.
And
Okay.
sorry to interrupt, but thank you, Mr. O'Halloran. We have two more people who have raised their hands for questions. I do have a question for you. Your first question was more of a comment on the rules. Would you like to enter that into the record as your public comment?
Yes, I would.
Okay, I'll make sure that gets recorded as that. All right, thank you for your comment and your question. Our next person, the name on the screen is IRDOD.
That's me. My name is Steve Harkins, and I would like to ask for a quick clarification, and then I have a question. My understanding is that in 2026, the maximum lease will be 150,000, but in 2041, it goes up to 175,000. Is that still true?
That is still true.
Okay, well, that's not what's on your slide. So the question I have is that I've actually watched you give examples. This is the third time. At the last RAC meeting, you were asked to provide, when you were going public, like now, you were asked to provide a example of a high cost lease. But the highest cost lease you've ever shown in any of your examples is $43,700 and something dollars. And there are floating home mortgages. There is one that's close to a million, my own is close to 150,000. I think would be great if you could include such an example, because I think it shows how ill-advised using RMV is as a basis for your formula. So if this is supposed to be questions, why haven't you included a high cost lease?
I think the intent was to try and find examples that are more representative of the general public and not to take, extreme examples out and show those as representative. It wasn't any intent to hide anything.
Well, I think as I just mentioned, I think it helps to understand what's going on if you see what happens at the limits of the formula, not just sort of in the middle. You need to know what happens through the whole range. So I'll just say again, I think it would be instructive for you to use a high cost lease so people can see how the formula works over the whole range of the scores, the leases.
Thank you for your feedback. We appreciate that. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Harkins. We appreciate your feedback on that. You mentioned you have another question. I want to make sure we get to everybody, and also we have enough time for public comment.
I'm sorry, I didn't really have another question. You clarified the 150, 175, and then I asked the question. I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate your feedback. Our next person is Dave Honeycutt.
Thanks, Danielle. Dave Honeycutt, Oregon Property Owners Association. I want to follow up with on Justin's comments, and I want to understand the difference between the program and the leasing for a floating recreational cabin versus a structure that obtains services from upland property, and how that works, and if floating recreational cabins are subject to the rules being proposed.
Floating recreational cabins are subject to the rules being proposed. They just obtain a different type of authorization through those rules. So the rules under Division 82 authorize waterway leases and registrations. So there's a subset of kind of smaller impact, smaller use categories, things like a private use dock, a private boathouse, a floating recreational cabin, voluntary habitat restoration. There's a subset of activities that the department considers, that are registered by the department. And so those registrations are not subject to the compensation rules that I went through. They just have a flat fee that's paid once every 5 years. Uses that are commercial in nature have more impact on the waterway. Those tend to fall into the department's waterway leasing program, which have a different set of rules and requirements associated with them, and are subject to those that compensation formula that I outlined. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm sorry to ask dumb questions, maybe dumb it
No.
down, but if I have a floating recreational cabin, are you going to base the amount of lease payments I make every year on the ALV times the RR times the AA to get to the average lease payment?
If you have a floating recreational cabin as it's defined in our rules, your structure it can be registered, so it doesn't need a waterway lease. And so it would not be subject to that rent compensation formula that uses
Okay.
the ALV. It's just a flat rate.
How are the
Yeah,
and how are the
Dave,
flat rates calculated?
sorry, Dave, the flat rate is just the application fee associated with that renewal. So right now, well, shoot, I don't have it in front of me, but the
Have
rules would
the-
propose to increase those fees, but they are a minimal increase. Let me grab.
Right now, the floating recreational cabin fee is $700 for every 5 years. And the fee kind of goes down from there depending on the size of the structure.
All right, and if I bring in a propane heater and something to cook with, and I haul it out when I'm done hunting for the day, I'm still going to be a floating recreational cabin.
That's the intent, yes. And I
All
think
right.
Blake's addressed that we'll, I think, do our best to change the rules so that's clear.
All right. Well, I'll email some suggested language.
Yeah, we'd love to see it. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much, Justin and Blake, for the presentation and answering the questions. And now we will begin the public rule hearing portion of this evening's meeting. If you wish to provide an oral comment, please raise your hand now and we'll call on you in the order in which hands are raised. These comments are direct feedback on the proposed rule language, what you think of these and whatnot. These are different from the questions in that we won't be responding to your comments. We will take them, we will record them, we will compile them into a document and provide responses in general. But again, if you have a public comment that you want on the record, as you know, DSL needs to review this, go ahead and please raise your hand now. If you're in Zoom, again, you'll click the reactions near the bottom and click raise hand, or if you're on the phone, press *9. And we ask that you remain muted until you're called. And we ask that you limit your comments to 2 minutes. If you have written material to enter into the record, please say so and try to summarize your comments. And for the record, please clearly state your name and affiliation before providing comment. As a reminder, again, we will not be answering questions or responding to comments during this portion of the hearing. And if you wish to provide written comment, we will share the methods to submit those following the conclusion of oral comments. So at this time, if you have a comment you would like entered into the record, please raise your hand. All right, seeing no one raising their hand, I'll go ahead and move forward. If you wish to provide written comment, those may be submitted through August 15th of this year at 5 p.m. And you can email us at dsl.rules@dsl.oregon.gov. We have an online submission form, which is on our rulemaking page. There's a link there. Or you could send it by mail to the Oregon Department of State Lands. Please call attention to the rules coordinator. And the mailing address is 775 Summer Street Northeast, Suite 100, Salem, Oregon, 97301. So what is next in this rulemaking process? DSL will review and consider all written and oral public comments. For example, as you could tell from today, we will be examining our definition of floating recreational cabin to make sure that it is as good as it can be. The proposed rules will go through an internal review and approval process. The final proposed rules will be presented for approval to the State Land Board at the December 2025 meeting. At that time, public testimony can be made about the proposed rules. That Land Board meeting is scheduled for December 9th. If you just check out our Land Board website on the main DSL page, you can get updates about when those meetings are happening and the agendas. And finally, the approved rules will become effective July 1st, 2026. And on behalf of the department, I would like to thank you for attending this evening's meeting and for your questions and comments. And at this time, I hereby close the public hearing on the proposed rules for the Department of State Lands. Oh, thank you. Before I finish, we have Ms. Lopez has raised her hand. Go ahead.
Thank you, Danielle. I apologize. I know you're trying to wrap up. I want to ask.
That's okay.
I want to ask you, how do we access this recorded meeting?
Thank you for that question. Excellent question. By the end of the week, I will have it posted to the department's YouTube page, and it will be linked on that rulemaking webpage under the accordion for OAR 141-082. There will be a link for it. And I say by the end of the week because I will be traveling. We have some other public rule hearings that we're doing in person this week, and I will be traveling. So I don't want to tell you too soon, but by Friday, it will be up.
Thank you, Danielle.
You're welcome. So at this time, I hereby close the public hearing on the proposed rules for the Department of State Lands administrative rules governing the issuance of waterway leases, licenses, and registrations. Thank you very much.